Chandra, Chandra, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Alabama. Producing is one of the most exciting and dynamic jobs in the newsroom. I've been producing since I was 16 years old, so over 30 years, and I love it. There's nothing about it that I would change. So basically right now, from time to time I teach a producing class for news, for newscasts that our students take. And then also I am producing my own work. I produce different videos focused on weather disasters and documentaries. Some of those are short form and some are long form. So I'm primarily producing documentaries at this time. Some people call them mini-docs, some people call them long features. If it's about reality and about people and how people are affected by weather or by stories that impact people, that's usually the kind of stories that I'm really attracted to.
So if someone does not typically know what producing is, how would you explain producing?
Well, producers are the people who are behind the scenes making the decisions about the content that you see. They are working with the on-air people who do the presentations, who do the scripts, the voiceovers, but they are the people who are making the content come to life. How to capture it, how to help the audience understand the full story, and also just how to think about the presentation of the story. Is it going to have graphics? Is it going to be told with voiceover? Is it going to be told with video? And so a producer is the one who helps make the story happen.
So how would you say it's been pivoting from producing in a newsroom to producing mini-docs to teaching producing?
We're all producers, but we're all not reporters and journalists,
Okay.
if that makes sense. A lot of people consider themselves producers because they're recording and putting things out on the internet. Well, then you have news producers. News producers are people who are constantly thinking about their audience. We have movie producers, we have news producers, and they're thinking about a certain type of consumer who's going to try to understand the content they're creating. So for me, the transition has been really awesome as an academic because I can produce anything that I want to, but it has to be meaningful and it has to add to the academy of what people understand about my profession and how I'm using it to teach students about how to tell their stories. And so for me, I think I have the best of both worlds because I can produce short form content, long form content, and use all of that to teach my students.
What is your step-by-step when producing a short form content, I'll say?
Okay, so one of the things that I have enjoyed doing for the last decade is when a disaster happens, I really start looking at how it impacts a community, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane. And those types of stories, for me, I look at, one, the depth of the disaster, and then I start looking at what are the stories, how are people prepared for it. I look at what visuals are available, what radio and television stations in that community did to prepare their community, and then I start working with them in partnership to really look at their communication before, during, and after the disaster and work with them on their messaging and their footage to kind of help tell the story of the people that are behind the scenes telling those stories. So I'm behind the journalists who are telling the public the stories, and I'm helping tell their stories about the motivation and what they're doing to do their jobs as reporters, producers, videographers, anchors, and the news directors and the managers behind the scenes about the decisions they make about how they try to warn the public. And so I'm capturing and working with them on the video that they shoot and that they're producing and capturing them in the moment too. So I look at it as I'm behind the scenes of the people who are behind the scenes.
And so what drew you to producing? Like, when did you first start producing? What drew you into it?
Well, ever since I was little, I always watched the news with my parents. I never remember not watching the news in the evenings, local and network. And then when we had the 24-hour network starting, I remember always just being gravitated to the point of news is always happening around the world. Like everyone has a story, and there's always stories happening. And so when I got 16, I remember this clearly. There was an Explorer Club in our community, and I asked my mom, it was focused at the TV station, if she would take me. And I just fell in love with it. I mean, they allowed us to, practice on the sets. They allowed us to do anything, to kind of get into what was journalism and try to understand it. And then at my school, I was involved in the school newspaper, the yearbook, anything to help tell stories. And the first chance that I had at my junior college that I went to in Jasper, they had just built a new TV studio. And so I was able to do sports shows, news shows, and I had a great faculty member from the University of Alabama who got me really tied in when I transferred to the University of Alabama. And I've been in a TV station, I tell everyone, since I was 16 because I tried to find studios. Anybody who would let me do anything to create content, I tried to find them and tell them what I wanted to do, and they would let me. Anybody just let me create content. And so all the way through college and my undergrad, my master's and PhD, I've always worked with media in some form.
And so, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hectic does producing get? If you could, range it from newsroom production, documentary production, and teaching producing. How hectic does it get?
It's very hard to teach producing unless you are in a newsroom and you understand the clear role of a producer. It's one of the most pressured jobs in the newsroom because you have a deadline at 5, 6, or 10. And now you've got noon shows and you've got morning shows and midday shows, whatever it may be. But not only do you have that as a deadline for your show to get everything organized in the content, now you have social media deadlines, you have promotion deadlines. It is a very deadline oriented job. And that is what's so hard to teach because in a classroom, you can have deadlines for a week or 2 or, days, but they don't understand the amount of pressure that a newsroom producer has. For documentaries, it's different because you may have a deadline of a few weeks, you may have a deadline of months or a year for a project, but a daily news show producer is one of the most pressured jobs that there is. I equivalent it to what a doctor does because you don't know what's going to happen as far as news. You don't have the life and death decision on you that a doctor has. But if you don't produce it and produce it accurately and on time, and you're going to miss out on the story. And your news director is going to ask you, why did we not have this in the same manner that our competition had? And it's so easy to mess it up. That's the other problem. So you've really got to be on your game every day, every hour, and every minute. And that is something that I try to teach in the classroom, but it's still impossible to teach unless they're in a newsroom and they're hearing it, they're seeing it, and they're feeling it and doing it every day.
So how do you deal with the stress of the job between, typing up and writing those hard stories, those sad stories, and also just the pressure of it? So how do you deal with the stress of producing?
Well, the stress is a real thing, and you've got to learn how to control it. You've got to always think about what does the viewer need to know. And even though the story may be something that's hard to tell about the death of a family member that was murdered or that died in a car accident or that just had a tragic accident, a construction accident or something, for example. And you just always have to think about what would that family member, if they hear this story, what are they going to remember about it on the other end? And you have to take that into consideration with every word, every frame of video that you show, and everything that they hear, because it's happened to me. I've had friends and family members who have become news stories. And when you really think about what they're hearing on the other side of it, it makes you think about how you construct that story. And you never need to forget that. And that would help your stress level. Every producer needs to sleep at night. And if they can't sleep at night, they can't do their job well. So thinking about the ethics of the job that you do helps you get through that stress and that pressure and how you handle those stories. And I really believe that. And that's really what I try to talk to students about when I'm teaching is you've got to think about what you're saying and doing and who is taking that information in, because it's important. It's important to a family member. If they just lost a child and they see that story, they're going to get upset if you didn't handle it correctly. Mm-hmm. And I would too. And so you really have to think about it that way.
And so is there anything else that you want to add or anything that you want the viewers to know about producing?
Yeah, producers should be mature individuals who are truly thinking about what you're hearing at home. And news stations are hurting right now because there's not a lot of people who understand what producers do. And so the jobs are in high demand. So we do have a lot of young producers who are in newsrooms who are learning and they're wanting to be good, strong journalists. And the pressure that they're under is really being underpaid right now. We see the main anchors who are the faces of the station and the voices of the station. And what I would want people to know is to support all those people at stations. The news corporations, when I talk to managers at news corporations, at conferences, or any opportunity I get, I always tell them, give producers more money. We need to keep young people involved in the news and being news producers to stay for the long term. A lot of producers are burning out very young and very quick because of that pressure. So we've got to do more training and make sure they understand that the job they're doing is valuable, and we want people behind the scenes to be valued so that they'll stay in the news industry. We need them. We need their thinking, we need their creativity to continue to appeal to audiences, because news is very important. We need people to be informed. And they know how to get to newer audiences and communicate in different ways. So just because the news model is changing doesn't mean that the way we train people about how to tell stories should be different. It's got to be factual. It's got to be accurate in every form. And we've got to have attribution to know where that story is coming from. Those things have never changed. Right. But the way that we tell some of those stories in short form and on social media have. But people have got to know where that information is coming from so they can make up their own minds. And we don't need to tell them what to think. We just need to show them that the information's there.